All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We are so happy that you have decided to join us this morning. My name is Laura Connolly. I am the District 14 Director, and I want to welcome you to a very special celebration of the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote. And before we start, I do want to show you our agenda for this morning, and I want to cover a few Zoom guidelines before we start. So first of all, your microphone is now muted. We ask you to please do not unmute yourself unless you are one of the speakers for today's program, and then only unmute yourself when it is your turn to speak. To mute or unmute, as you've probably figured out, move your mouse around until you see the mute control and then click on it. Your video camera has also been turned off to avoid distractions because you all look so awesome with your costumes. You will still be able to see us, but we will not be able to see you. So please leave your camera off until you are asked to turn it on if you're entering the suffragist costume contest. You may then turn it off again when you're directed to do so at the conclusion of the contest. And this control for your camera is next to the mute button. If you want to ask a question of our guest speaker, we ask that you locate the Zoom chat box, which is typically at the bottom of your computer. And you want to move your mouse around until you see it. Click on where it says chat, type your question into the chat box, and then hit enter on your keyboard. And time permitting, Catherine Gallagher is going to relay your question to be addressed. The chat box is also how you should communicate any technology issues. So Paula Juvenal will be monitoring the chat box throughout the entire program and will respond to you that way. Two other quick things. If you need to take a break from Zoom, please do so. Your camera is off and your microphone is off, so you can literally just walk away from your computer as you need to. Just don't leave the Zoom meeting and then try to re-enter. And if you need to hang up before the program is over, please do so. We are recording this entire program, and copies of the recording will be made available to everyone. So with that, let me admit a couple more people here, and then I would like to invite Nancy Quinter, who is our District 12 co-chaplain, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, along with Lee Krause, our District 12 Director. And no one should unmute except Lee and Nancy. Ladies.
Thank you, Laura. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lee and Nancy. Very nice. Next, I would like to ask Kathleen Hudson, our District 8 Director, to introduce all of our special guests. Kathleen?
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce ladies from both of our GFWC executive committees, our GFWC International Executive Committee and our GFWC Florida Executive Committee. As I introduce each one of you, please turn your camera on so that everyone may see you. And after you've been introduced, then please turn it off again. I don't believe Jolie Frankfurt has joined us this morning. She's our GFWC International Secretary. The rest of these ladies are from our GFWC Florida Executive Committee. Diane Forrester, our President.
Good morning. And I wanted to tell you, I think Jolie is up in Washington at the GF convention, but I could be wrong, or the GF executive meeting.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Linda O'Toole, our president-elect. Laura, should we be seeing each one of these?
We should if they turn their camera off, but that's okay. They may not all want to wave. I know she's on.
Okay, Sarah Desereau, our first vice president. Terry Reese, Our second vice president, Dara Bergdahl, is our recording secretary, and I am not sure if Dara has joined us yet. Kathy Geary, our treasurer. Candace Postel, our GFWC Florida Director of Junior Clubs. Candy Jackson, our corresponding secretary. Shannon Bailey, our parliamentary advisor. And then other GFWC Florida ladies, Teresa Crockett, our President's Project co-chairman. Candy Aubin, our leadership chairman. And Sue Allen, our Women's History and Resource Center chairman. And the mayor of Naples, Teresa Heitman, was scheduled to join us. Valerie Tomaselli, the book publisher for our guest speaker who will be introduced later in the program, and our guest speaker's sister, Margaret Motley. And that's everyone.
Thank you, Kathleen, and a special welcome to all of our guests for being here. I also want to thank a very special group of ladies, our planning committee, who put together today's program, and that would include Kathleen Hudson, Lee Krause, Catherine Gallagher, Elena Coates, Fran Kane, Susan Luce, Heidi Blaine, and Paula Juvenal. Thank you, ladies. I know you put a lot of hard work in today's program, and we are grateful. Next, I would like to invite Fran Kane, District 14 Chaplain, and Pat Tillman Shad, District 8 Chaplain, to share an inspirational thought. Ladies?
Go ahead, Pat.
Pat, you may still be muted. We're not hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I had thought, since we are dealing with the suffragette movement, I came up with some quotes from some of the wise suffragettes. The world has never yet seen a truly great and virtuous nation, because in the degradation of women, the very fountains of life are poisoned at their source. That quote came from Lucretia Mott. In the adjustment of the new order of things, we women demand an equal voice, and we shall accept nothing less. That is from Carrie Chapman Catt, and I thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Fran, did you have something as well?
Yes, I'm going to pray. Please join me. We thank you, God, for this day of remembrance and celebration. We thank you for all the women who have gone before us. We are so grateful for the work they have done. We are grateful for the foundation they have laid for us 100 years ago. They labored tirelessly for the cause they believed in. Without these women, we would not be where we are today. To use an old phrase, because of these women, we have come a long way, baby. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran and Pat. That was lovely. All right. I would now like to introduce a very special guest, Dr. Bonnie Jeffress from the Bravo Actors from St. Petersburg College. Welcome, Bonnie. Please unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased that we're able to do this for you today. I really wish, and I know you do too, that we could be there in person, all of us together, all dressed up, celebrating together as a in-person group as the suffragettes did. But this is our next best thing. We've been able to get this play to you today.
Thank you, Bonnie. So the cast in order of appearance is presented here for you, and Bonnie and her group have gotten together and recorded the play for us. And so Bonnie, are you ready for me to play it?
Yes.
All right, very good. Here we go, ladies.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are just
need to fast forward to the point where it actually starts. Let me do that right now. There's Dr. Bonnie. Okay.
2010 is the 90th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Do I hear you say, wait a minute, the country is 234 years old, and women have only been voting for 90 years? What's the problem here? The problem began with the words of the Founding Fathers. Not the ones they put in, the ones they left out. 1776, when John Adams sat with a committee of men in Philadelphia writing the Declaration of Independence, he got a letter from his wife Abigail.
John, in the new code of laws, remember the ladies. Do not put such unlimited power in the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. We will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation.
But when the Founding Fathers sat down to write the Declaration and the Constitution, they left out one critical word: women. Nearly 60 years later, when Sarah and Angelina Grimke spoke to state legislatures about the evils of slavery, their actions were denounced from the pulpit as contrary to God's law and the natural order.
The power of woman is her dependence, flowing from that weakness God has given her for her protection. When she assumes the place and tone of a man as a public reformer, her character becomes unnatural and the way for degeneracy and ruin.
Sarah Grimke had an answer for that.
this distinction between the duties of men and women as moral beings, that is what is virtue in men, is vice in women. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks and permit us to stand upright.
In 1848, a group of women organized the first Women's Right Convention in Seneca Falls, New York. It took great courage. In the 1840s, respectable women did not even speak in public, let alone call meetings. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said later,
"We felt as helpless and hopeless as if we had suddenly been asked to construct a steam engine."
but they were determined. They rewrote the Declaration of Independence.
"We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal."
And they called for equal rights under the law. At the convention, abolitionist Frederick Douglass spoke in favor of women voting. Reporting the resolutions of the convention in his newspaper, the North Star, he noted,
In respect to political rights, there can be no reason in the world for denying to woman the elective franchise.
in the 1850s, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucy Stone led a group of courageous women who plunged headlong into the fight for abolition and universal suffrage. They formed the American Equal Rights Association. One newspaper denounced them as
mummified and fossilated females, void of domestic duties, habits, and natural affections.
In fact, most of the women were married with children. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote suffrage speeches while nursing her sixth child, her daughter, who would continue her mother's work. When the Civil War began in 1861, suffragists deferred their campaign for the vote to give full attention to the national crisis. Annie T. Whitmire was appointed superintendent of all Army diet kitchens. Mary Walker served as the first female surgeon. Louisa May Alcott and thousands of other women served as nurses. Anna Ella Carroll was one of Lincoln's advisors on strategy. In 1865, when the war was over and Congress debated an amendment to give freed slaves the right to vote, the suffragists petitioned Congress to include women too.
We represent 15 million people, one half the entire population of the country. The Constitution classes us as free people, yet we are governed without our consent, compelled to pay taxes without appeal, and punished for violations of law without choice of judge or juror. You are now amending the Constitution and placing new safeguards around the individual rights of 4 million emancipated slaves. We ask that you extend the full right of suffrage to women, the only remaining class of disfranchised citizens, and thus fulfill your constitutional obligation.
Sojourner Truth, whose speech, Ain't I a Woman, which had so moved the Equal Rights Convention in 1851, spoke again in 1867 for women's right to vote.
I speak for the rights of colored women. I want to keep the thing stirring now that the ice is cracked. You've been having our rights for so long that you think like a slaveholder, you own us.
Suffragist Frances Gage wrote,
52,000 pulpits in this country have been teaching women the lesson that has been taught them for centuries, that they must not think about voting. But when 52,000 pulpits at the beginning of this war lifted up their voices and asked of women, come out and help us, did they stand back? In every home in the whole United States, they rose up and went to work for the nation.
but in spite of the petitions and the passion, the 14th and 15th Amendments were silent on the issue of voting rights for women. Nevertheless, the suffragists would not give up. In 1869, Lucy Stone sent out an appeal to men and women of America.
Get every man or woman to sign this petition who is not satisfied, while women, idiots, felons, and lunatics are the only classes excluded from the exercise of the right of suffrage. Let the great army of working women who wish to secure a fair day's wages for a fair day's work sign it. Let the wife, from whom the law takes the right to what she earns, sign it. Let the mother, who has no legal right to her own children, sign it.
Civil War nurse Clara Barton spoke at the Suffrage Convention in 1870.
Brothers, when you were weak and I was strong, I toiled for you. Now you are strong and I ask your aid. I ask the ballot for myself and my sex. As I stood by you, I pray you stand by me and mine.
When the Senate considered the woman question again in 1872, the same tired old arguments were raised to oppose women voting.
I hope, sir, that it will not be considered ungracious in me that I oppose the will of any lady. But when she so far misunderstands her duty as to want to go to working on the road and serving in the army, I want to protect her against it. Should we attempt to overturn the social status of the world as it has existed for 6,000 years?
Only lawmaker who argued that if the founding fathers had meant women to vote, they would have said so directly. Elizabeth Cady Stanton responded.
Women did vote in America at the time the Constitution was adopted. If the framers of the Constitution meant they should not, why did they not distinctly say so? The women of the country, having at last roused up to their rights and duties and citizens, have a word to say. It is not safe to leave the intentions of the founding fathers or of the Heavenly Father wholly to masculine interpretation.
Congress appointed a committee to study the floods of petitions arriving daily from women. This is how it worked.
Women's petitions are generally referred to a full committee of fools, carefully laid on the floor of the committee room to be a target at which to shoot tobacco juice. And the committee man who can hit the mark oftenest is regarded as having done the most to kill the petition.
Even the President of the United States remained indifferent to the poignant arguments of the suffragists. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said of President Rutherford Hayes,
In President Hayes' last message, he reviews the interests of the Republic, from the Army and the Navy to the crowded condition of the mummies, dead ducks, and fishes in the Smithsonian Institution. Yet he forgets to mention 20 million citizens robbed of their social, civil, and political rights. Resolved that a committee be appointed to wait upon the President and remind him of the existence of one half of the American people whom he has accidentally overlooked.
the pioneer women who were settling the West had no intention of being overlooked. Women in the territory of Wyoming won the vote in 1869, followed shortly by women in the neighboring territories of Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. When Wyoming applied for statehood in 1890, a furious bloc of senators opposed its admission because it allowed women to vote. The senator from Tennessee called it a reform against nature and predicted it would unsex and degrade the women of America. But Wyoming citizens refused to give in. Their legislator cabled back to Washington.
We will remain out of the Union 100 years rather than come in without our women.
Encouraging words. But as the years of struggle rolled by, the women of Seneca Falls realized that they would not live to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote,
We are sowing winter wheat, which other hands than ours will reap and enjoy.
24 hours before she died in 1902, Stanton dictated this plea to Theodore Roosevelt.
Mr. President, Abraham Lincoln immortalized himself by the emancipation of 4 million slaves. Immortalize yourself by bringing about the complete emancipation of 36 million women.
By 1900, over 3 million women worked for wages outside the home, often in hazardous and exploitive conditions, often with their children beside them at the machinery. They needed the ballot to give them a voice in making labor laws. In the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, 146 workers were killed trying to escape an unsafe building into which they had been locked to keep them at work. Suffragist Mary Ware Dennett wrote,
It is enough to silence forever the selfish, addle-headed drivel of the anti-suffragists who say that working women can safely trust their welfare to their natural protectors. Trust the men who allow 700 women to sit wedged between the machines in a 10-story building with no outside fire escapes and the exits shuttered and locked. We claim in no uncertain voice that the time has come when women should have the one efficient tool with which to make for themselves decent and safe working conditions, the ballot.
Working women flocked to the suffragist banner. This new army of supporters, women succeeded in putting suffrage on the state's agendas.
In 1912, the suffrage referendum was passed in Arizona, Kansas, and Oregon.
Defeated in Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin.
In 1913, 5,000 women marched down Pennsylvania Avenue on the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, asking for the vote. They were mobbed by a hostile crowd.
In 1914, the suffrage referendum passed in Montana and Nevada.
Defeated in North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Missouri.
1915, the suffrage referendum failed in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, the saloons handed out pink tickets printed with "Good for 2 drinks if woman suffrage is defeated."
When the United States entered World War I in 1917, women were urged once again to put aside their cause for the war effort. Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter reminded them.
The suffragists of Civil War days gave up their campaign to work for their country, expecting to be enfranchised in return for all their good services. They were told they must wait. Now, in 1917, they are still waiting.
But the suffragists of 1917 had read history. They worked for the war, and they continued to work for the vote. While women in unprecedented numbers entered war service, standing in for soldiers in factories and on farms, they also held mass meetings, handed out countless leaflets, sponsored parades, plays, lectures, and teas, anything to get the arguments for women's suffrage before the public.
One suffragist said, "Some days I got up at 5:30 and did not get home until midnight, going from office to office, talking the question out."
In New York, 1,030,000 women signed a petition asking for the right to vote. The petitions were pasted on placards borne by women marchers in a suffrage parade. The procession of the petitions alone covered more than half a mile.
Other suffragists turned to the militant tactics of the Women's Party. They picketed outside the White House, keeping their vigil in rain and cold. This was a new tactic in 1917. The police finally arrested them for obstructing traffic. One eyewitness described the arrests.
An intense silence fell. The watchers saw not only younger women, but white-haired grandmothers hoisted into the crowded patrol wagon, their heads erect and their frail hands holding tightly to the banner until it was wrested from them by brute force.
Other suffrage organizations lobbied, appealed to every state, and canvassed every legislature. While the White House pickets kept public attention focused on the issue, finally, in 1917, at the height of the first President Wilson spoke to urge the Congress to act on suffrage.
This is a people's war. They think that democracy means that women shall play their part alongside men and upon an equal footing with them. If we reject measures like this in ignorant defiance of what a new age has brought forth, they will cease to follow us or trust us.
In January of 1918, the 19th Amendment to give women the right to vote came before the House.
Down the roll call, name by name, droned the voice of the clerk. Mann of Illinois and Barnhart of Indiana had come from hospital beds to vote for suffrage. Sims of Tennessee came in agony from a broken shoulder to vote yes. Hicks of New York came from his wife's deathbed to keep his promise to her and vote for suffrage. Yes, no, name by name came the vote. It was close, but it was enough.
When the vote was over, the corridors filled with smiling, happy women. On the way to the elevators, a woman began to sing, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow," with the words of the suffragists. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all women here below.
Despite this monumental triumph, the suffragists still had much work to do. It would be another year before the Senate passed the suffrage amendment, and another year beyond that before the necessary 36 states would ratify it. Finally, on August 26, 1920, 90 years ago, the 19th Amendment gave women throughout the nation the right to vote. At the last suffrage convention of 1920, Carrie Chapman Catt spoke to the joyful women.
Ours has been a movement with a soul ever leading on. Women came, served, and passed on, but others came to take their places. Who shall say that all the hosts of the millions of women who have toiled and hoped and met delay are not here today and joining in the rejoicing? Their cause has won. Be glad today. Let your joy be unconfined. Let it speak so clearly that its echo will be heard round the world. Let it find its way into the soul of every woman who is longing for the opportunity and liberty still denied her. Let your voices bring out the gladness in your hearts. Let us sing together, "My country, 'tis of thee." My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of my mother's pride, from every mountain side, let freedom ring.
Thank you, Bonnie and Bravo actors. That play is every bit as good today as it was 10 years ago when you recorded it, and we are grateful that you were able to be with us this morning and share it virtually. So thanks to you and your and all of the Bravo actors.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to invite Catherine Gallagher, President of GFWC Rotunda West Women's Club, to introduce our guest speaker.
It is my honor to introduce Doris Weatherford, author of a very timely presentation of the history of women's suffrage. The book is called Victory for the Vote: The Fight for Women's Suffrage and the Century That Followed. The book is a revelation full of facts that you and I have never heard before. Ms. Weatherford does her research from original documents and relates the history that is as compelling to read as any gripping novel. Doris Weatherford has said, "My favorite part of writing is the research and analysis. I love learning new things and putting them into the context of their times." Among her many accomplishments, Doris has chaired the Florida Women's Hall of Fame, received the League of Women Voters Lifetime Achievement Award, and the National Order of Women's Legislators Hall of Fame Award. Both Doris Weatherford and her husband, Dr. Roy Weatherford, were beloved professors at the University of South Florida for more than 30 years. Some of our own GFWC members were fortunate to have attended USF during their tenure. Please welcome Doris Weatherford to our 100th anniversary celebration.
Doris, I think you'll need to unmute and turn your camera on. So just move your mouse around and you should find the mute button and the start video button. And then we'll be able to hear and see you. Doris, I've sent you a request asking you to unmute. You should just be able to click on that.
Technology.
Yes, the joys of technology.
Yes.
Okay, we will get there. Catherine, do you maybe want to give Doris a call and we could move on to the next part of the program if she's having trouble unmuting? Maybe you and she could work privately to get that done, or should we give her another minute?
I'll give her a call right now.
All right, very good. We will come back to Doris. That was such a beautiful introduction. So let me share my screen again and we will move on to the next part of our program. And this is actually a group of 16 club women that are going to tell you the story of GFWC's role in the suffrage movement. So as you know, Jane Cunningham Crowley founded the General Federation of Women's Clubs in 1890, and the Florida Federation joined in 1895. Both dates were well prior to the suffrage movement coming to the forefront in the United States. This morning, we will be hearing from 16 of our club women who have a powerful story to tell you. Ladies, when it's your turn, please state your name, your club name, and your district, and then tell your part of the story. First up is Killian O'Donnell. Killian? Remember to unmute and turn your camera on.
Mine doesn't work.
Okay, we can hear you though.
Since its founding in 1890, the General Federation of Women's Clubs had leaders and supporters of the suffrage movement within its ranks. Feminist leader and GFWC club women, Carrie Chapman Catt, Jane Addams, and Lucy Stone, helped lead the push for suffrage and numerous causes within GFWC. However, consistent with the national mood and sentiment, GFWC overall support and endorsement of suffrage was gradual.
Linda? Linda Collins? There she is. Linda, you're still muted. I see you, but I can't hear you. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Linda Collins, President, GFWC, Women's Club of Sarasota, District 14. Eva Perry Moore, GFWC International President, 1908 to 1912, used her position as a leader in women's issues to advocate for suffrage. She spoke at the National American Women's Suffrage Association convention alongside Susan B. Anthony.
Thank you, Linda. Next up is Susan. Linda, you can mute, and Susan, please unmute.
I am Susan Luce from the at GFWC's biennial convention in 1912. Mrs. Charles Edson of California, a social activist, proposed passing a GFWC resolution in support of women's suffrage. Although the convention took place 64 years after the Seneca Falls Convention and 22 years after the founding of GFWC, the resolution was deemed out of order. While many club women supported the cause of suffrage and numerous state federations had already endorsed the proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution, The Federation as a whole was not ready to publicly support this controversial issue.
Thank you, Susan. Reggie, please unmute.
Reggie Gibson, president of the Tarpon Springs Women's Club. In March 1913, the day before Woodrow Wilson's presidential inauguration, a delegation of club women joined thousands of women to march in the historic women's suffrage procession in Washington, D.C. Club women Jane Addams and Carrie Chapman Catt helped organize and lead the event, which followed the same route the inaugural parade would take the following day. The procession was designed to highlight women's exclusion from the democratic process. It would prove to be a critical moment for the movement and helped it to develop national support.
Thanks, Reggie. You can mute, and Fran, please unmute.
Fran Kane, Bradenton Women's Club, District 14. By 1914, 17 GFWC state federations had passed resolutions in support of women's suffrage. Across the country, club women formed suffrage clubs and organized local rallies, marches, and meetings to help advance their cause. At the 1914 GFWC Biennial Convention, the resolution to endorse suffrage was again raised. Club women were beginning to understand that the right to vote gave them a voice over school boards, where and when their children could work, and a regulation over home life. In essence, the right to vote was now understood as an extension of their own club work. With the First World War looming, voting also became an urgent matter of patriotic duty.
Thank you, Fran. You can go ahead and mute. Elena, please unmute.
Elena Coates, Tampa Women's Club, District 8. Carrie Chapman Catt addressed her fellow club women at the convention with an impassioned speech in favor of endorsing suffrage. She was also serving as president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Catt declared that it is not a question of right for the women of our land to have the vote. It is a question of duty. It is a question of patriotism. It is a question of women attending the duties of their motherhood.
Thank you, Elena. Please mute. And Pat, please unmute.
Pat Tillman Shad from the Women's Club of Plant City, District 8. On the morning of June 13, 1914, GFWC International President Anna Pennybacker, 1912 to 1916, stood center stage at the convention. A member of the GFWC Texas Federation, she was a strong proponent of suffrage and had lectured extensively throughout Texas to promote women's education and suffrage. Ms. Pennybacker called for a vote on the resolution, which stated that the General Federation of Women's Clubs gives the cause of political equality for men and women its moral support by recording its earnest belief in the principle of political equality regardless of sex. GFWC passed the resolution, which was greeted by abundant cheering, and nays only took 12. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Please mute. And Cheryl, you are up. Please unmute.
Sherry Donahue?
I'm sorry, Sherry, yes.
Yes, I was going to say, okay.
It's you, sorry.
That's all right. Hi, my name is Sherry Donahue, and I proudly represent the GFWC Temple Terrace Women's Club in District 8. Here in Florida, the issue of suffrage was also a high priority for the GFWC Florida Federation of Women's Clubs. Florida's involvement with GFWC had begun in 1895, when representatives of village improvement associations from Crescent City, Green Cove Springs, Jacksonville, Orange City, and Tarpon Springs met in Green Cove Springs to incorporate the Florida Federation of Women's Clubs. Within a decade, 20 clubs had affiliated with the FFWC, which emerged in 1910 as the state's most powerful woman-led organization with some 1,600 members. By 1917, membership had risen to over 9,000 members in 59 new clubs.
Thank you, Sherry. Please mute, and Karen, please unmute. Catherine, was she able to get on? I know she was having some technical difficulties. This is Karen Grigsby's part. Are you doing it for her?
I'm here. I'm here.
Wonderful. Just tip your computer down so we can see your smiling face.
I don't want to.
But we want to see you. Beautiful. Thank you.
Good morning, all. I am Karen Grigsby. I am with the Women's Club of Plant City in District 8. As early as 1913, an amendment to the Florida State Constitution to enfranchise women had been introduced in the Florida legislature. Although several legislative attempts to grant women equal voting rights failed between 1911 and 1919, 16 Florida towns and 20 counties had enfranchised women in municipal elections.
Thank you, Karen. You can go ahead and mute. And Patricia, you are up.
Good morning. Patricia Wolf. I am president for the Women's Club of Plant City, and I'm with District 8. One of the Florida state organizers of women's suffrage was Elizabeth Skinner, a native of Dunedin. She served as president of the GFWC Club in Dunedin and went on to serve as GFWC Florida president 1921-1923. Ms. Skinner also served as vice president of the Florida Equal Suffrage Association, where she was a member of the legislative committee, participating in lobbying the Tallahassee legislature for an amendment to the state constitution to allow women to vote. She toured Florida, interviewing legislators and organizing interests of women's suffrage. She spoke at many meetings and handed out suffrage literature to educate others of women's suffrage. And she assisted in forming additional local suffrage leagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patricia. You can go ahead and mute. And Annette, you are up next. Please unmute.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Annette Bellinger, and I'm the president of the GFWC Lutz Land Lakes Women's Club in District 8. Following the 1914 GFWC Biennial Convention, with firm support for their recently passed resolution, GFWC club women across Florida and across the country marched, protested, and advocated for the right to vote. GFWC's official endorsement of suffrage for women in 1914 was major news. It affirmed that suffrage had become a mainstream cause for middle-class women from every part of the country.
Thank you, Annette. You can go ahead and mute. Kathy, please unmute.
Hello, Kathy Geary, GFWC Tampa Women's Club, District 8. Over the next few years, the General Federation of Women's Clubs magazine kept club women apprised of activities toward passage of a national suffrage amendment. By 1917, when scores of suffragists, including Alice Paul, were imprisoned at the Occoquan Workhouse in Lorton, Virginia, for picketing the White House to demand the right to vote, GFWC's magazine was a vital source of information for American women about the political and legislative strategies behind the fight for suffrage and portraits of women on the front lines of the battle. When the iron-jawed angels were released after enduring months of brutalization, maggot-infested food, and forced feedings, the public outcry about their treatment made the possibility of a federal suffrage amendment a reality.
Thank you, Kathy. You can go ahead and mute. And Dee, please unmute.
Hello, I'm Dolores D. McIntosh, President of the Tampa Chapter Women's Club, District 8. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits the states and the federal government from denying the right to vote to citizens of the United States on the basis of sex. Initially introduced to Congress in 1878, the amendment finally passed the House of Representatives on May 21st, 1919, followed by the Senate on June 4th, 1919. It was then submitted to the states for ratification.
Thank you, Dee. You can go ahead and mute. And Doris, please unmute.
Good morning, Doris Walker, GFWC, Rotunda West Women's Club, District 12. On August the 18th, 1920, Tennessee was the last of the necessary 36 states to secure ratification. The 19th Amendment was officially adopted on August the 26th, 1920, the culmination of a decades-long movement for women's suffrage. Florida was not one of the 36 states that ratified the amendment, and the Florida legislature did not go through the formality of approval until 1969.
Thank you, Doris. You can go ahead and mute. And Lee, please unmute.
Hello, my name is Lee Krause, and I am the District Director for District 12, and I am from the Naples Women's Club. Women's suffrage may not have become a reality without the historic support of GFWC. We are proud of the women who went before us. They've taught us perseverance, persistence, and courage, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. Today, 100 years later, we are celebrating their incredible accomplishment.
Thank you, Lee. And thank you, ladies. That was truly fantastic. Lee, you can go ahead and mute. And I'm going to ask Catherine Gallagher to please unmute and tell us where we stand with our guest speaker, Catherine.
Well, I have spoken with Doris, and she believes that she has her video working. I was wondering if you were able to see her. So she's waiting for you to, yep, there she is. And if you will ask her to unmute, I think she should be ready.
I will do that indeed. And thank you for your beautiful introduction of her a few minutes ago. So Doris is now unmuted. Doris, if you can take your mouse and click on the start video button, then we'll be able to see you as well as hear you. I can see that you're unmuted. There you are. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. There has been so much already said, so I'm gonna pick and choose, but I want to go back to the very beginning where we had the picture of Abigail Adams. Everybody knows Abigail wrote this letter to her husband while the revolution was still underway, and says, as long as we're forming a new government, consider the fact that half of the people are women, and we should be considered citizens too. And he laughed. He just absolutely sneered. Funniest thing he'd ever heard. There were other women who did the same thing. There were even professional philosophers, women who weren't recognized as philosophers, but a woman in Massachusetts wrote an essay called on the equality of men and women that got international publicity. They took it more seriously in London than in America. But the real beginning of the organization began with the 1840 anti-slavery conference in London. You were about to hear me say 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, but we got to go back right 8 years earlier. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was 25 years old then, and she was on her honeymoon in London with her husband, Henry, and they attended the World Anti-Slavery Conference. They were accompanied by Lucretia Mott, who was an ordained Quaker preacher and very much respected, one of my very favorite people, and several other women who were elected delegates from their Quaker organizations who intended to participate in this World Conference to end slavery. So they got there, and the men, all the men, except William Lloyd Garrison, who was late to the meeting, all the men, English, French, African, refused to be in a meeting with what was then called a promiscuous meeting with women attending. And they told them they had to sit behind a curtain where they wouldn't be seen and therefore be distracting to men. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott refused to do that. And they spent the rest of the week walking around in the parks and talking to each other, and vowed that when they got home, they would form their own organization. And then 8 years went by. It's important to know that all of these women were married, or almost all of them were married. Susan B. Anthony deliberately turned down a couple of proposals because she wanted to stay single. Because in those days, many states that had laws that seriously limited a married woman's existence. For example, in 1876, when they wanted to rent a room in Philadelphia for the centennial of 1776, July 4th, 1776 had its centennial, 1876, and a bunch of women and men, lots and lots of people, went to Philadelphia for this centennial, and they wanted to rent space. Only a unmarried woman could sign a contract, and all of those others were married. So they had to wait for Susan to come so that she could sign their rental contract. And that sort of law existed in every state. Women could not go to court, which meant that they couldn't sue for rightful recovery of their property, certainly couldn't sue for divorce. They that limited they couldn't sue or be sued, which meant that they couldn't really act in business, because who's going to want to go into a business partnership with somebody who can't be sued? There were just no choices once you were a widow except to find another man. And even then, inheritance law was written in such a way that in many states, all the way up until the 1970s, men had automatic preference in custody of children. A man could literally will away his wife's babies, and there wasn't anything she could do about it. So they wanted to discuss all these things, and they wanted to vote, because the vote would make it easier to make these and more happen. So 8 years went by, during which Susan B. Anthony was having babies and Lucretia Mott was bringing up her older children. And then finally, Susan, I'm sorry, I said Susan, it's Elizabeth Cady Stanton, lived in Seneca Falls, New York at that point. And Lucretia Mott went up to visit her sister, Martha Wright, who lives in Auburn, New York, very close by. And they put a 3-line notice in the newspaper that they were going to have a meeting on women's rights. 300 people turned up for this meeting, to their great, great surprise. So they started organizing. They had a second meeting 2 weeks later. And then they went on with annual conventions every year up until the Civil War. The first truly national convention outside of just their state of New York was in Worcester, Massachusetts in October of 1870. So we're going to have another opportunity to refresh people's memory on this come October, because we'll have the 120th anniversary of that convention. So they made improvements in many states in many of these little issues that are nonetheless terribly, terribly important. And people don't realize how egregious it was. In Louisiana, a man literally owned his wife's clothes. She had no right to pack a bag and take her clothes. And the society generally stood along with these things, that divorce was unheard of. And then the Civil War, which almost all the feminists had supported, came along. And for most of the decade of the 1860s, they put their emphasis on the war instead of on themselves. And they continued an organization that they called the Loyal League, and actually used it as a smart organizing strategy. They had people sign petitions against slavery and charged a penny for each signature, which gave Susan B. Anthony the first paid money she'd ever had in this effort, and gave them a long list of supporters all across the country. Meanwhile, out west, men had realized that they have a better civilization if you include women. And in 1869, the very first bill introduced into the Oregon legislature was a bill to enfranchise women. It passed unanimously. The appointed governor, appointed by the president, acknowledged that his wife was a whole lot smarter than he was, that her reading and writing skills far exceeded his. And that was the case over and over again, that many men said, my wife could do a better job of this than I could do. Why not give her the title? She's doing the work anyway. So that was Wyoming in 1869. A few weeks later, Utah imitated them. Utah, 1870, gave women full voting rights. They had it for 17 years until Congress realized this and vetoed it, took it away. Because many Utah women were polygamous, somehow this meant men were casting more votes than they should have, because it was assumed that women would vote the same way their husbands were, which was not necessarily true at all. I mean, many of these women were very independent. But anyway, Utah lost it. Washington women had the vote for 4 years after their territorial government passed it. But then again, their state Supreme Court struck it down on a technicality. So there were battles and battles and battles to be fought. It was far more complex than people realize. You can see how we had been working on state campaigns and making pretty good progress. But many people, especially the East, wanted a federal ruling that would apply to everybody, where rights would be the same no matter where you were. There was a little bit of disparity between the organizations, and frankly, some competition and rivalry between the organization run by Lucy Stone and Louise May Alcott, and Mary Livermore, who was also a popular writer at that time. They and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony took different approaches for about 2 decades. There was more than a little personal jealousy and stupidity, and finally their daughters got them back on track. Alice Stone Blackwell, the daughter of Lucy Stone, and her wonderfully feminist husband, Henry Blackwell, and Harriet Stanton Blatch, who was the daughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Blatch being her married name. She had lived in England for quite a few years and learned organizing techniques over there. And she came back and those two got their mother's organizations back again, which seemed good for a while. But it's an interesting question about how much competition inspires people. Sad but true, but sometimes people are motivated because they don't like somebody else and they want to beat them. You know, the jealousy, the rivalry, they may be working for the same cause, but sometimes you get more done with a competitive force out there. Anyway, so we went for several years with nothing happening. A few states added in the West, but not many. And the eastern states just weren't doing anything. They had one election in Rhode Island in 1887. And about that time, Alice Paul came back from England, and she used the model that women use over there, and men too, of being much more vocal than much more vocal, much more willing to set fires in mailboxes, that kind of thing that you've seen English women do that American women don't do typically.
Doris, I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're so interested in hearing about Mayman Jennings as we begin a letter writing a campaign to encourage Governor DeSantis to admit her to the Hall of Fame. You have any pull with Governor DeSantis? What could you tell us about May?
She was very important. She comes in a little later here because southern states come in later. So let me, if I may, just go back to the Alice Paul, Harry Chapman Catt.
Of course.
After Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony are dead.
Okay.
But so the upshot is that by 1917, every western state except New Mexico had enfranchised women. And you have tremendous disparity now between what your rights are depending on where you live, which is a civil right that we don't think of civil rights that day in that way today, that if you move from Iowa to Indiana, you may lose some rights. It doesn't happen anymore. And that's a very important point. Although it does still happen a little bit with reproductive rights, and it's worth thinking about. So Mayman Jennings became leader here in Florida, along with her sister-in-law, Mary Baird Bryan. They both had husbands who had been powerful in politics. Sherman Jennings had been governor of Florida, and William Jennings Bryan has been the 3-time Democratic nominee for president. He disagreed with Woodrow Wilson about going into World War I and resigned from Secretary of State, and she moved down to Florida. Those two women, Mary Baird Bryan, who gets more attention in the journals because she was nationally known, but Mayman Jennings is important to you because she was a leader in the GFWC, and she was crucial in bringing the GFC to be favorable. They, along with a very young Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and Helen Hunt Jackson from Jacksonville, who was actually part of the Women's Party led by Paul and not part of May Man Jennings' outfit. And again, complexities, the police, etc. You really can't ignore them. They're there all the time. But they lobbied the legislature every day or every session from 1913 to 1920. And even though the Florida session then were supposed to be biennial, there were some special sessions called too. And they were there every year. Every year they had different proposals of state rights or partial suffrage rights or something. But they never could get full rights. One of your speakers mentioned earlier that we got municipal rights, and that's tied up with the prohibition movement. And again, it's just complicated. Anyway, by this time, the national movement had very much settled on giving up the state by state strategy, unless the state just happened to pop up. They were working for a federal amendment that would be applicable everywhere. So to go back to that, you have to realize that constitutional amendments are very, very difficult. The founding fathers intended them to be difficult. The first 12 were passed immediately after the naming of the Bill of Rights into housekeeping amendments. And then we didn't have any for a long time until the 13th abolished slavery and the 14th gave civil rights to blacks, and the 15th gave the right to vote to blacks. And it only said, the 14th didn't use the word male. The 15th did not have the word male in it. It said the right of citizens of the United States shall not be denied by any state. So black people, men and women, had the clear right to vote. So a bunch of women, both black and white, tested this amendment all over the country in a dozen different jurisdictions. And it was a Missouri case that made it to the Supreme Court in 1894. And the court, being all male, all white, just said, well, you know, everybody knew this was intended for black men. Everybody knew. It doesn't matter what it says. And then they got out the Bible and quoted all the things in the Bible about how women are supposed to obey their husbands and so forth. Very different from today. So after that, they started working for a federal amendment. That takes 2/3 of both houses of Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the legislature. That is an insurmountable test. It's only been done a few times, and largely when the issue was passé, not while it was still as controversial as this one was. So Terry Chapman-Chatt did some very careful targeting and defeated a couple of senators who got us a majority in the Senate. We had a majority in the House. And so in the 1918 election, we had the votes counted to just barely pass it through Congress by the 2/3 majority. But Henry Cabot Lodge, the president, started a movement to stop it, and it didn't get out of there until June. That's when Florida, we were one of the few still in session at that time. And we were the first to have the opportunity to vote on it. The May Man Jennings and the others decided not to accept that opportunity because it would fail. And that was a Friday. The following Tuesday, the other states started to ratify it. And by August 18th, it had gotten to the southern state of Tennessee, which was her last choice because the governors in Vermont and Connecticut and places like that considered themselves more liberal they refused to meet. So she had no choice but to go to West Virginia and Tennessee, that are often sneered at, but those were the states that ultimately passed it.
Doris? Hi, it's Laura.
Hi.
Hi. I could listen to you all day, I feel like. You have such wonderful knowledge, but I want to give our ladies an opportunity to see if maybe they have some questions for you. So ladies, we have a true expert on this subject here with us this morning. I invite you to put any questions you may have for Doris in the chat box. We just have a couple of minutes left where she would love to answer your questions. So go ahead and put them in the chat box, and either Catherine or I will relay them to her. She's already addressed the one about Mayman Jennings that I know I had. Anybody else have one? I'm going to mute you, Catherine, because I can hear that keyboard clicking. Anybody else have a question for Doris? Don't be shy. Here we go. Here's one, Doris. Why did Florida wait so long to ratify? So we know they weren't part of the first group and Tennessee was the final one needed, but why did Florida wait so long to ratify?
You're probably picking up on 1969 there. Somebody, okay, that was just a formality. After it had passed, Connecticut and Vermont very quickly jumped in and said, oh, hey, us too, at the time. And then it was a moot issue. But for the 50th anniversary of the League of Women Voters, which had formed in 1919, the Florida legislature formally adopted the 19th Amendment. It didn't have any legal effect whatsoever. It was just a proclamation to make league members happy.
I see. Okay. I want to pop your book information back up one more time as well, if that's okay. Let me share my screen and scroll back up to when Catherine so beautifully introduced Doris. And this is, she's written many books, but this is the most recent one, Victory for the Vote. And as Catherine so beautifully said, it is available on Amazon. And I think Catherine has already finished reading it. She's ahead of me, I know that. So if anybody else is interested in reading about what Doris had to say, there is the information right there. Anything else for Doris? I've got to stop sharing to be able to see the chat box. Let's see here, Doris, if we have any other questions for you. Okay, here's one. One is, how many books have you written?
I published my first book in 1986.
1986, wow.
You can see it here. It's titled Foreign and Female Immigrant Women in America. And it is about immigrant women in the era from 1840s to 1920s.
Beautiful, thank you.
And then I wrote 2 books on World War II. I don't know where the camera goes, but this is the second book on World War II. I can just barely see myself here. I don't know if you can see it.
We can see it. Yep.
Okay.
Rosie.
And I wrote a 2-volume history of women in American politics that is divided up by offices. Women who have been governors, women who have been senators.
Women in American politics. Beautiful, thank you. Okay, and the last question then, Doris, if we could. It says, can your books be purchased on Amazon? I think I know the answer to that, because I have a link up there for your most recent book that is available on Amazon.
Yes.
And then I want to read one more chat message for you, which is, I think it's from your sister, and it says, greetings to everyone from Arkansas. Our family is so proud of Doris. Great presentation. Is that from your sister, Margaret? I think it is.
Thank you, Margaret.
So we were excited to have Doris's sister, Margaret, with us this morning. Doris, this has truly been our honor to have you with us this morning, and I do hope, ladies, that you will go and explore a little bit more about all of the many things that Doris has done and written about in her very diverse career, but so many things. She knows more than any of us would probably ever hope to on this topic. So thank you for being with us this morning. It's truly been our pleasure, Doris.
You're entirely welcome. You've all been very nice. I didn't point out that I'm wearing the mask you made.
Yes. There's my matching one, and many of us have one.
Garment out of it.
Thank you. All right, so we are now going to move on to the next part of our presentation. And let me just get back where we were. There we go. And I would like to invite Catherine Gallagher, again, president of GFWC Rotunda West Women's Club, to announce our proclamations from around our 3 districts. Catherine?
Thank you. Many communities in the state of Florida have recognized the courageous and powerful women who fought for the ratification of the 19th Amendment by issuing proclamations of congratulations on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And right here we see a proclamation from the City of Naples to the Naples Women's Club. We have a proclamation from Clearwater to the City of Clearwater to Clearwater Community Women's Club, North Pinellas Women's Club, Women's Club of Clearwater, and thank you so much. What a beautiful proclamation. We have a proclamation to North Pinellas Women's Club from the City of Safe Harbor, Florida. A proclamation from the City of Temple Terrace to the GFWC Temple Terrace Women's Club. And we have a proclamation and a picture from the GFWC North Pinellas Women's Club from the City of Dunedin. We have a proclamation from the City of Tarpon Springs congratulating GFWC Women's Club of Tarpon Springs. We have this is a really cool one. This is from Charlotte County, Florida, proclaiming August 18th as the anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the United States, congratulating 3 women's clubs within Charlotte County. Women's Club of Port Charlotte, Women's Club, the GFWC Punta Gorda Women's Club, and the GFWC Rotunda West Women's Club.
Very good. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank
you. Thank you to each of you ladies who worked so hard with your local elected officials on this recognition. Did we forget anyone? Is there anyone else who received a proclamation who would like to share that with us? All right.
Laura?
Yes, Doris?
I just wanted to clarify for people because some of these certificates say the 18th and some have been saying the 26th. What happened was when the Tennessee legislature voted right away.
Joanne wrote the letter.
Overwhelming
Proclamation to the mayor.
Yes.
And then Jane Husser sent us the official proclamation. So if you could put me in there.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Doris. Sorry.
I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I just wanted to clarify because people are going to be asking that. Why did we have this on both the 18th and then we have it again on the 26th? And the reason is really an important story that shows you the politics of the time. They had passed the Senate, Tennessee Senate easily. It tied in the Tennessee House, and 26 members of the Tennessee House literally left Nashville in the dark of night and holed up in Decatur, Alabama for a week trying to prevent a quorum. And finally, the governor got so fed up, he just took the ratification certificate and mailed it off to Washington. And when it got to Washington on August 26th, it was declared as part of the Constitution. So if people ask you why the 18th, why the 26th, in between, we had an illustration of how bad government was at the time.
Thank you. We do get a lot of questions on that. And I don't know if you're able to see the comments in the chat box, Doris, but if you move your mouse around and click on the button that says chat, you'll be able to see them all. One of the ladies on the call called you a national treasure, and I agree, that is true. So thank you. Such a wealth of knowledge. All right, ladies, guess what? It's time for the costume contest. And Paula Juvenal, District 14 Treasurer, I invite you to unmute and tell us how this is going to work.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can't see you though. You want to turn your camera on?
Not particularly.
I will, because you'll yell at me. But I love you. Okay, well, it's time for the costume contest, and we're going to be judging by district. So everyone, if you could please keep your cameras off until asked by district to turn your camera on. We'll do one district at a time. And if you're interested in being in the contest, you'll turn your camera on when I announce your district. If you're not sure how to turn it on, just move your mouse around and watch on the bottom where it says start video. And that's where you'll click to turn it on and then also to turn it off again. Once the judge has decided on a winner, I'll ask you to again turn your cameras off by clicking stop video. And we'll do this for each of the districts. Once all 3 districts have been judged, we'll announce the winner from each district. And each winner will turn their camera on so that we can get a screenshot. Once we get the screenshot, you'll need to turn your cameras off again, and we'll continue on with the program. And the winners will receive a surprise gift. I'm from District 14. I will be judging District 8. Elena Coates from District 8 will judge District 12, and Doris Walker from District 12 will judge District 14. So if we can have anybody from District 8 that is interested in being judged, if you would please turn your camera on now. Just District 8, please. Okay, so far I'm not seeing anybody. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right.
And ladies, if you don't have your Zoom in gallery view, you may want to do that so you can see them all. So move your mouse around, and in the upper right corner, you'll see either the word speaker view or gallery view. And if you click on it, you'll go back and forth between just seeing the person who's speaking and seeing everybody who's wants to be seen. So I'm going to try and be the photographer here while Paula, you're the judge on this one, right?
Yeah, and you have to keep clicking. Like I have 5 pages, so I have to click through each page to see people.
I love all these smile ladies because I'm taking your picture while we're doing this. Got it. I don't envy you, Paula.
I know, it's
costumes.
Jeez. I just want to look one more time and make sure I didn't miss anybody, that's all.
I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me read your names. I've got Lucy, Sherry, Paula, Elizabeth, Jolie, and Candace. Did I miss anybody?
Laura, I'm not in the contest. I just wanted to show you that I'm at GFWC headquarters, sort of.
Jolie, hang on one second for me. Smile. Love it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I've got the same amount. So if everybody in District 8 will turn their cameras off, please. Okay, and now Elena Coates is going to judge District 12. So if everybody from District 12 that wants to be in the contest could please turn on your cameras.
All right, let's see. I've got Lucy, Bruce Moore, Catherine, Doris, Gwen, and Beverly. 6, is that what you see, Paula?
I'm at 5. I'm looking for 1 more, so hold on. No, I got 5. Hold on, let me start over.
Do you see Lucy? Oh, you know what? I don't see Lucy's picture. Lucy may not be trying to compete, are you?
2, 3, 4.
Oh, but now we've got Joanne added. Okay, so we've got.
Okay, I got 6. What do you got?
6. Smile, ladies. Oops, come back. We're missing 1.
He left.
Okay, hang on until she gets back. Okay, ready? Smile. Picture time. Thank you.
Elena, have you decided on your winner, or do you need more time?
No, I think I got it.
Okay, so if everybody from District 12 would please turn your cameras off. Okay, now if everybody from District 14 would please turn your camera on if you want to be in the contest.
Oh my goodness, little tiny tiles on my screen. Okay, I've got Patty Snyder, Fran, Heidi, June, Lucille, Susan, Lauren, Kay, Laura, Jane, Judy, Dee, Maria, Elisa, Mimi, and Laurie.
Wow.
Wow, I don't envy this judge. Smile, ladies. I'm going to grab a screenshot here. Ready? Smile. Thank you.
Laura, I got 15. What do you got?
I don't know. Let me just try and count everybody here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I got 16.
Okay. Oh, yeah, 16. I got it. Okay. Somebody must not have had it on in the very beginning when I was looking. So, Doris, just let me know when you have made a decision.
I didn't get in.
I'm sorry?
Hello?
Oh, I think Gladys is trying to get in. So one more.
Oh,
Yeah.
one more. Okay.
Okay, we're going to do another screenshot. Ready? 1,
Okay.
2, 3. Smile. Thank you.
All right. Doris, are you all set?
Yes, I'm set.
Okay, so Laura, everybody, well, first, everybody from District 14, if you would please turn off your cameras. Okay. Thank you. You too, Gladys. Love to look at you, dear, but we have to turn it off for now.
I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my.
That's okay, Gladys. That's okay. Move your mouse around.
Yes.
And at the bottom, you should
I'm on my
stop
phone,
video.
though. I'm on my phone.
I see.
I will do it right now.
All right,
Hold on.
honey. That's fine.
Sorry about that. Okay.
That's okay, Gladys. That's all right. Okay, so I guess are we ready to, when we announce the winners, if you would please turn your camera on so that Laura can get a screenshot, I would appreciate it. So, Doris, do you want to tell us who District 14's winner is?
Yes, Judy D.
All right, so Judy, if you would turn on your camera. I can't see. I haven't seen her yet.
Love it. Beautiful. Smile.
Okay, there she is.
It's Barbara
Okay.
Strode, not Judy.
I see that. Smile, Barbara.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, I got your picture. Thank you.
I'm ready to march.
Okay, Elena, you want to tell us who won in District 12?
Moore. I just Bruce Moore.
Bruce Moore. Wow, okay.
Liz. What is it?
Somebody's got Bruce Moore, I guess, as their name on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's
Yep,
actually
there we go.
Liz Moore.
Okay, there we go.
Smile so we can get your picture. It's Liz, right?
Yes.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
And from District 8, Paula Herlock. Your camera on, Paula. Looking by name had nothing to do with it, just because we have the same name.
Paula, if you could, actually, let me do it this way. All right, smile. Lovely, love the hat. All right, got it. All finished, Paula? Juvenile?
Yep, go ahead with the program.
Excellent. Well, thank you, ladies. That was amazing. I am so impressed by all these beautiful costumes. So terrific. I'm glad I didn't have to judge. I would have given you all a first place prize. So coming to the end of our program here, I'm going to share my screen briefly for one more slide or two. Heidi Blaine, District 14 Special Projects Chairman, has a quick announcement for us.
Hi, ladies. This was a wonderful, awesome program. So I just want to remind you that a quiz was sent out, and now that we're semi-experts, I encourage you to take the quiz and see how you did and what you learned today.
Thank you, Heidi. And last but certainly not least, I invite Lee Krause, District 12 Director, to offer some closing remarks. Lee?
I want Eleanor Roosevelt said, when you have decided what you believe, what you feel must be done, have the courage to stand alone and be counted. Today, as we close, we can stand proud knowing that we, as GFWC women, do not stand alone, but we stand united and will continue the legacy put before us from the many women who have created this milestone in our lives. And I'd like to just say a personal thank you to Laura Connolly, who has worked so diligently on this, and the planning committee, and of course, Doris Weatherford. So thank you. I hope you go out, stand tall, and say congratulations for 100 years. We made it.
Thank you, Lee. Congratulations to all of us. We so enjoyed the program this morning. So bye, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.